here for years, rocking my peers, putting suckers in fear, making the tears rain down like a monsoon. Listen to the bass go boom, explosive, overpowering, over the competition. We're towering, record shot. When I drop these lyrics, that'll make you call and cry. Don't you dare stare. You better move.
This is Mark Phelps, Super Training Gym. Super Training Gym, the second strongest gym in the West. We're here today with Silent Mike, ladies and gentlemen. Give it a hand for Silent Mike. He's been doing fantastic lately. Oh no, never mind. We're here today with Chris Duffin, former world record holder in the squat, but a bunch of bastards stole his squat record from him.
Damn,
but Chris is on a mission to teach the world how to lift, and he's here today to teach us how to lift. He's going to show us the sumo deadlift and the conventional deadlift. We got Fat Dan, formerly known as Fat Dan, and we got Filipino Thunder in the mix. So we got some different body types doing some different lifts. Chris is going to take us through it. Why should we be deadlifting?
Thank you. You know, a lot of people think the deadlift is a risky move. Maybe it should be avoided. And you know what I say to that? I say, bullshit. That's what I say to that. Imagine.
Hey, I'm going to hurt my back, though.
Yeah, you throw your back out, and now you're trying to take the groceries in to the house, and you know, your wife's got to take them in because it's hurting you, right? Or let's take the other side. You're a 65-year-old grandmother, and you're trying to pick up your granddaughter off the floor, but you're stressing out because you're worried about it hurting your back, right? I mean, this is life stuff. This is important shit. You need to know how to handle and pick up loads off the floor. I mean, it is simple. This is a human proposition that you must know how to do. So it is incredibly important. And the people I work with, I mean, especially the clinicians and stuff, you get a client with back pain, it's the first thing you do. Teach them to deadlift. And they're going to walk out, and they may be, like I said, maybe that 65-year-old grandmother with tears running down their eyes. Not because they hurt, but the fact that they know that they can go pick up that grandbaby they couldn't.
Hey, I'm right there with the 65-year-old woman. I've cried many times over deadlifts.
So,
you want to talk me through it, or do you want to show me how to do it? How do you normally do it when you coach?
I'm going to talk through it first, then we'll coach through it. So first thing, we're going to cover both the conventional and the sumo, and we're going to coach them with the exact same set of cues. So I think that's important. We're going to coach them with the exact same set of cues. And there's a lot of ways to roam. You know, I'm not going to say that this is the only way to deadlift. It is not. But it's really important to understand that this is a very repeatable and coachable method.
What about what Ed Cohn says? We got to follow what he says.
Well, we'll make some Ed Cohn stuff too.
Okay, there you go. That's why I'm just thinking of all the comments that pop up. Like, oh, Ed Cohn does it this way, and this guy does it that way, and that guy does it this way.
There's a lot of different ways to do it. Right. There's a lot of different ways. But like I said, it's important at the end of the day that we have some certain things taken care of. That we've got the hips in the right position, that we've got the tension in the right area, that we've got the right postural position. And so here's my method for how to coach that and create that.
There we go.
So yeah, that's it. So one of the important things we want to make sure is that we've got neutral spine position, okay? So we want to have neutral spine position all the way through into the head. The head becomes less important. Some people really crank it back. We're going to avoid that. We're going to keep, right in here, okay? We want to have tightness against the bar when we do that. So a lot of people, they'll walk up and just hit that bar cold. And if you start loading a whole bunch of weight on there, as soon as you do that, you're going to start creating acceleration somewhere, and usually we end up rounding in the lumbar. So we want to avoid that. We want to have tension first. We want to have good bracing. If you want to talk bracing, I did a great video with Mike last year on squatting.
There you go.
So we covered bracing, we covered rooting, all this stuff. So we're just going to focus on the specific cues to get you dialed on squat. If you need to address those, watch those videos. We just covered it in a podcast earlier today. You can go through that, or you can go to my website, kabuki.ms, if you want some really in-depth stuff on that.
The portal.
But we're going to go through 5 cues, sumo and conventional. So the first thing that I like to do is make sure that we've got tension on the bar before we start. If we create tension, it's allow us to get in the best hip position possible. Right. So we want our hips high as possible and as deep this way as possible, but not so high that it becomes a stiff leg deadlift, or we create this big lever on the low back.
Gotcha.
So there's a balance there. So what we're gonna do is just walk up to the bar like we're gonna do a stiff-legged deadlift. And we're gonna create some tension. Boom, I'm gonna act like I'm gonna pick it up, okay? Tension, here, click, I'm gonna keep that, okay? Now I've got that tension basically between my shoulder and the floor. Then I'm gonna brace, okay? So now I've got a nice rigid core.
Number 2.
Yep. So pull up, bend over at the waist, pull up on the bar, brace. Now pull the hips in. You're gonna drive them in and deep and never letting go of that tension, okay? Then right as you're about ready to deadlift, we need to integrate the last element of creating this nice rigid spine. So it's in neutral position.
He likes to touch me a lot.
We've braced. We've got to cue this lat hard. We're not going to retract and pull shoulder blades back or anything like that, but you're going to create a rigidity. So if you watch from the side here, you'll see boom, boom. See him crank hard.
Right.
Pulling that, kind of closing the space at the
Pulling
back.
it together.
Like pec popping.
Yeah, except we don't want to.
Oh, no
lose
pec
the-
popping.
We don't want to lose the postural position here.
Right.
So we're just creating rigidity. We're not retracting. We're just there. We go.
It's more
Yep, right there.
trying to shove your
Oh.
shoulders downward.
Down. Yep, exactly.
How do we explain that?
But we're not going to actually like retract like
Yeah.
this per
Gotcha.
se. We're just making it incredibly rigid and tight and depressing as much as we can here.
I love depression.
Good times for a change.
So if you've got enough tension, as you get down, this is very, very last thing that you want to do. If you create too much tension in other areas first, you'll end up rounding in the spine. So this is the last piece. We want to create this stability first, then go here. This will almost feel like it breaks the bar off the ground as you do it.
Right.
Okay? Then from there, we punch the hips through.
That's what we're best at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little boop.
Yep.
So we want to think about wedging. So now we've dropped in position. We want to think about wedging our hips under the bar, really in the setup and through the lift. You don't want to think about lifting the bar, but wedging through to complete. You want the bar to move the least amount possible, actually. So I'm going to demonstrate it all really quick here. Boom. This is the conventional pull. Obviously, conventional pull, feet inside of arms. Arms are straight down. Boom. Pull up. Brace. Pull in. Lats. Boom. And drive through. Sumo pull. Same thing, except feet are outside of legs. Bend over at the waist. Pull up. Drive in. Lats. Drive through. You see, I can't even set up with this weight. It's coming off the ground.
Right. It's starting to float.
Yep. So a good pull isn't going to happen until you've got a few hundred pounds on the bar.
Right.
You actually can't set up properly. But this creates, as you can see, very neutral, rigid spine. Everything is right where we need to do, and all we've got to focus on is driving those hips through.
Is that
wedging
kind of
them
a
through.
goal? Is it a goal to try to make the weight float a little bit? Is that something you have people practice, or it just happens because they're getting so rigid and so tight?
Once you add a little weight, the weights will stay connected to the ground. The bar will bend a little bit.
Gotcha.
So we should never, at the start of the lift, somebody's always let loose. They maybe do all those things, and right when they go to pull, you go,
Yeah, you'll still hear the
right?
right.
That will never, never happen. You've got to, they've lost tension, and they're not gonna be set up correctly.
Right.
So,
Gotcha.
so Mark, on
All
to
right,
you.
Here we go. He made it look so damn easy.
Don't jack this up.
Just bend over at the waist, get a hold on the bar, pull up, like you're gonna bend over, row it, or stiff leg it, create some tension. Now wedge those hips between the shoulder and the bar. And lats, boom, wedge through.
You mentioned breathing after getting a stiff leg position. I've heard some people, after they get into rhythm of their pull, will breathe at the top. What are your thoughts on that?
If you're talking repetition, that's fine.
I mean, before you grab the bar, not repetition, even single.
So that is fine. I do it because I have trouble getting my breath and keeping it from the bend over position. What we don't want to do is we don't want to wait till our hips are all the way in and stabilized.
kind of like this.
So it just depends on how long you can hold it. I'm trying to minimize the amount of time, so I'm doing it at the latest point possible before I drive in.
Makes sense.
So you could do it up here.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
totally fine. Just means you got to hold it longer.
I didn't want to break up your 5 rules, but I know some
No,
people
it's
do
just
that.
to-
Yeah.
Yep.
Just to clear things up a little bit, sometimes with a belt on, this makes the whole thing a little bit more challenging sometimes, makes it more challenging sometimes to get your air. And when you're big and you're thick, like Chris is there,
He called me fat. He
yeah.
called me fat.
When you're fat, like Chris, it's hard to get your air. And so what he's talking about is he does it with his legs straight right before he goes, while other people, like Mike is pointing out, sometimes they'll breathe at the top. You're saying either way is acceptable as long as you got those other rules.
As long as before you drive the hips in with this setup. Like
Makes
I said,
sense.
you know, I'm not. There's other ways to deadlift.
Yeah.
This gets us. If we use this as a sequence together, it gets us everything that we want accomplished, and it's very coachable, very repeatable.
Do you have a preference breathing through the nose or breathing through the mouth?
No, I don't.
Either way, whatever works for somebody. Let me try the sumo. What I liked about what you said so far is there wasn't a ton of specifics. It was just rules.
Yep.
Here's the 5 rules. You didn't say, oh, your feet need to be this far apart, or they need to be this close together, or your hands need to be here. You said, you know, conventional, your hands are outside. Sumo, your hands are inside. You didn't say like you got to point your feet out 37 degrees, or you didn't have any weird, you know, thing like that. It was just a list of rules.
These
which
are
I
the very basic and straightforward approach. If we're working with somebody, we might refine some minor stuff.
Well, it'll depend on them,
but
man.
yeah, that's gonna depend person to person.
I feel like that's what some people may focus too much on.
It is.
Yeah.
Yep. Pull up, wedge the hips in, lats. There we go. Pull up on that bar, wedge those hips in. More. There we go.
Mike sometimes will get a little roundy through here. You have any advice for some of that? Yeah.
There's a lot of
That lat will help take out that rounding in the lower thoracic.
Right.
That thoracic lumbar junction.
Now, a real key component to the whole thing, though, is to do this over and over again throughout a training cycle, right? You're not just going to like take these 5 tips and these 5 rules. Sometimes you can notice a increase in strength, but you're really going to notice the biggest increase in strength when you follow these 5 rules for a period of time, correct?
Yeah, and it's hard to think about. I try to have like all our cueing into like the least number of rules possible or cues to get what we want. Because even 5, that's like a mind fuck when you walk up. It's like, what? Oh, I missed one. You know, it's like it needs to be. You need to get to the point where you don't have to.
You forgot the third rule.
Yeah,
Arnold
this is what you're
Schwarzenegger.
doing. So it takes practice. Repeat.
Twins? Anybody?
Oh, I promised some cone. Right?
Yeah.
So we talked about the hips being as close to the bar as possible, and we talked about wedging. If you want to step back, I'll show you.
Ed Cohn, 901-pound deadlift at 220 pounds.
The man.
The GOAT.
So let's say we do everything exactly
God
the
rest
same.
your soul, Eddie.
Pull up, drive in, wedge, wedge, wedge. And it's the scooch. One leg, then the other. To wedge in just a little bit tighter.
the scooch.
The scooch.
Scooch your gooch.
Wow.
Yes.
He never shared that with us, that motherfucker.
What? He's holding back.
Wow, what a piece of shit. I'm gonna have to call him up.
But you're basically driving one leg out and then the other one out, just trying to drive in a little bit.
One
just
at a time.
Just get those hips in just a little bit tighter.
How critical is it for someone to have their back flat? You know, we hear a lot about, you know, rounded back deadlifts, and then also there's got to be some play when you get to 99% of your max or 95% of your max. What's your thoughts on the
Speaking
rounded
of
flat?
the GOAT, there is a picture going around online, you know, and he's a little turnt more than you might think. You know, it's not picture perfect lines, right? The human body isn't even made in straight lines per se.
Well, my view on that, one of those is look at a lot of the big deadlifters, and they have a huge amount of mass on their back.
Right.
So even your picture may not be reality. What you think is the spine may be hypertrophy. What I found is if we cue everything correctly,
Like Mike blamed his clothes one time for having a rounded back.
we can get to a neutral position to maintain it. And this is where I talk about the lat being really integral.
Right.
So if we lose just a little bit there, we'll end up with that little bit of rounding through the lift. And if we take that out and get better engagement, we'll see an improvement in position. I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not neutral. I'm rounded."
Right.
But if you want to look at my erectors, I mean, it's like a couple inches before you even get to my spine.
Right.
So
They're just going to be sticking out anyway.
they're sticking
no
out.
matter what the hell you do.
It's really hard to actually see what
Right.
it is doing.
Let's have a few of these other guys jump in here so we can see what they look like when they do it. He's always super explosive off the ground.
Yep. Slow it down. And we're just going to coach you on this, see what we can do, okay? Sure. So it's
He's-
135.
he's a mess, I
you don't have to
apologize.
show me how explosive you are, okay? Sure. All right. So Bend over at the waist.
Another dude asking you to bend over again.
All right. Pull up on that bar. Drive those hips in. Okay. A little bit more. More here. There. Now go. You guys see his back position? Way different. And that was, did you see the very, very minor change in shoulder? There. Now go. It's like moving 1/4 of an inch that last little bit, but that dramatically changed this structure right here.
So right here, the weights are coming off the ground a little bit. When he has a little bit more weight on there, what's going to move? His hips will drop a little bit more. The bar will bend a little bit more.
The bar will bend.
Okay.
The bar will bend. That's a great way to warm up with this weight. How much do you deadlift?
700.
Yeah. He gets over 500. As soon as he gets over like 550, the bar. That's where his deadlift is going from. So why would he be training 2 different deadlifts?
Right. Cool. Chris, you have a preference with how tight you wear your belt or where you wear your belt? You coach people on like when they should put it on or anything like that?
Not really. I've gone
Personal preference type deal?
Yeah. I mean, I like to do a fair bit of pulling with no belt. I'm not big on maxing out for ego purposes without a belt.
Right.
Some people like to and have PRs there. Not
right.
A risk reward just for me.
I'd rather do some training there though, just so you are training.
So I may work up to 500-600 pounds before I throw a belt on.
Gotcha.
Tightness, again, same thing. You don't want it so tight that it becomes restrictive or it sucks you in because then you can't actually brace appropriately.
Can't push out against it.
I think that's super common. People think the belt's gonna wrap their spine.
The belt is the stabilization. It is not.
Yeah.
So now we talked about in our podcast that outer sheath.
Right.
Right. This is again an outer sheath. Makes it even more rigid because we're not having the muscle, but you're going to drive out and push against it all the way around.
Say the belt's almost more for your stomach than it is for your lower back in a way.
Absolutely.
Because that's what you're trying to use
it
through your stomach.
It is all the way around. It's
for this. It's for the whole torso.
Exactly.
What about belt placement?
I prefer to have the belt across the obliques.
Okay. So kind of, I guess it'll depend on.
I know some people wear them up higher.
I guess it depends on how long you are or whatever, but maybe about around your belly button.
Yeah, basically around the belly button, right where those obliques are, is the best spot. So, but I've never worn it high. I know a few people do wear them really high.
Yeah.
Just a preference, right? Do you have a preference in terms of each person is going to have a certain ability to be able to take their kind of chest and torso and be able to kind of angle it upward? For me, it's very difficult for me to try to deadlift and be kind of almost like here. See, some people can drop their butt down so much and kind of squat it up. Do you have a preference on where someone's torso should be when they're pulling?
That's really going to be individual biomechanics. I mean, all we can do as control is try to keep our weight behind that bar, yet that lever as close to the bar as possible. So we want this bar just kind of grazing in here, and as long as it's doing this, and we've got good hip position, you're gonna, if somebody's got 4-inch longer arms than me, they're gonna be here, right? And I'm gonna be here.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is a sign of somebody that's been coaching people for a very long time. He doesn't have a magic wand that he can wave over everybody to make them lift the same way. He recognizes that, and he's just dealing with what he's got in front of him. It makes a lot of sense.
Good. Very good wedge there. Very good wedge all the way through.
Nice wedgie.
It's more sumo than conventional, but thoughts on when to lock your hips and when to lock your knees?
This should be almost simultaneous. So we should be rolling here. I see a lot of people, they'll want to, so anytime you see somebody, this is a really good thing to understand. Anytime you see somebody finish back here, they're not engaging their glutes maximally. So earlier in the lift. It's an absolute fact.
We have a boy named Fat Boy that does that all the time.
Yep.
Maximal glute development system.
So if we're firing, they're together and it's going to be boom, right there like this, right? Here means we're using the erectors to pull up over the top of the torso. We don't want to have to pull our torso over the top of the hips, okay? We want to be wedging the hips through to complete the lift, not doing a torso lift.
Yeah, and then sumo?
Same exact sumo. So you'll see the same thing in the sumo. It's going to look same thing. It's going to be, they're going to get here and then be doing this, right?
Right.
If they're firing those glutes late as well. Yep.
Chris, give us 2 or 3 of your favorite 2 or 3 favorite assistance movements. People always have a lot of questions about that for deadlifting, whether it's conventional or sumo or whatever.
One of my favorites is doing rack pulls, but I want to be clear. A lot of people do them not incorrectly, but they do it for the wrong reason. They think that rack pulls are going to help them with their lockout, and it is not. What rack pulls are going to do is exactly what we were talking about earlier, is gaining control over this structure and strengthening this, okay, so that we don't lose that positioning. If you're missing on lockout, nearly always I'm going to drive you back to the setup. There's something wrong in the setup, and you're usually a very explosive puller off the floor.
Right.
Right? I get to pick on people too. I hear you're the punching bag, so I'm just jumping right in.
I've made this comparison.
You'll end up really explosive off the floor.
Right.
But if we slow down that setup and change the setup, it's going to rebalance the lift, and now they won't have trouble locking out because they're going to be in a better position. They're here doing this,
Right.
trying to recorrect the positioning that we never lost to begin with.
Right, gotcha.
Okay, so rack pulls are a great assistance. I also enjoy doing some deficit work, but very, very small deficit work. I'm talking like 1 inch.
Right.
So maybe 2 inches at max. I see a lot of people, more is better, and so they get off these huge deficits, and now they're training something that isn't a deadlift.
Doing a completely different movement.
They're doing a different
almost,
lift, yeah. And potentially compromising themselves as well at the same time, because usually you'll see them getting in, they pushed it so far that they're compromising, getting in position, rounding, doing other things that are going to potentially put them in harm's way.
Right.
Pulling against chains is another favorite. So that I like loading the chain in the center of the bar. There's a couple things to that people don't realize. I'm actually doing a deficit and doing a rack work at the same time.
Gotcha.
Because with all the weight loaded in the center bar, the bar
It's not going to bend.
is
as
not
much.
going to bend.
Right.
And so I'm not getting that nice little, piece at the beginning I'm used to. So I'm getting, a 1-2 inch deficit basically, and I'm loading the top, and I'm training the whole movement. So,
Right.
So those are some of my favorites. They're just deadlift variations.
And then you mentioned the lats. Is there anything that we can work on, outside of the deadlift to help improve our positioning in the deadlift, help build up the lats, kind of the way you're talking about?
So what you should do is every time Mike is Silent Mike here is deadlifting, you should walk over and do his deadlift for bent over rows. It's a blast. One, it'll crush his ego, and you'll get stronger and better. So
That'll hurt really bad. Mike's getting strong. That'll kill.
It will. He's probably stronger than he was last year because I did that to him last year. He probably doesn't remember, but
I was very skinny last year.
he was. But bent over rows are another one of my favorites. So
Right.
just for overall development, and for the lat development, a huge player. And the lats play a big role in all 3 lifts, but it's not in actually moving the weight. It's actually controlling our position, and that plays a big role in how the lift is performed. We were talking
loves to hit people.
We were talking at lunch, and you were talking about how like Stan Efferton can't get bent over in the hole on squatting,
Right.
Because he has such a massive upper body structure. Same thing, right?
He's so jacked.
He is so jacked.
I think that wraps up. You got any more questions for him?
That's it. We done or we finished?
That's it from Super Training Gym, the second strongest gym in the West.
Boom! Leave us a like or you're off the team. Leave a comment down below. And if you want to watch other videos from the strongest gym in the West, click right here. If you want the best lifting gear in the game from howmuchyoubench.net, click over here. Right here.